You're on. All right, so we're going to start just a couple minutes early because I want to get lots accomplished today. First of all, does anybody need papers? Papers on Islam. Islam. Anybody? Going once, going twice. All right. Second, yes, sir.
Okay, on Islam.
On Islam, yes.
Islam tolerates Christians.
Yes, officially.
Yeah. Are there any other religions that they do that with?
All
religions.
All religions.
Okay.
All religions, you pay a price. We'll talk about that today. All religions, you pay a price to be tolerated. So, first of all, then we're going to go with anybody wants to ask a question about anything, a topic, an open forum, so to speak. Mr. Kanur.
Maybe more of just a comment. I'll preface this with saying I do not condone the violence that was portrayed in the Capitol this weekend, or last weekend, whenever it was, Tuesday. But when these people come back and say violence never solves anything, it's just a ludicrous statement. Especially being in the military, what the heck was I in the military for if not to be violent at times?
And violent control too.
Somewhat controlled violence.
Yeah, some of it. Matching violence with violence in a way.
Violence equals failure. Failure to communicate, failure diplomacy, failure of policy, failure of Christianity, failure of biblical ethics, failure all the way around. The reason we have armies, the reason we have military is because of the failure of sin. That's the only reason, folks. Without sin, we would need no armies, we would need no police officers, we would need no guns, we would need no bombs, we would need no battleships, we would need no jet fighters. Okay? So let's understand that from a Christian biblical viewpoint. Okay? That from the get-go, violence from Cain and Abel onwards is a symbol or equals failure of something. Something has failed. Something has not worked the way God intended it to work. Right? Now, that being said, violence in defense of limb or life or property or whatever is perfectly approved and actually commanded by God when it comes to defending, say, your neighbor, for example, or your own life or the life of those in your family. Okay? So even though violence equals failure, violence in defense is not wrong. Violence in offense is always wrong, biblically speaking. And the Bible does not provide for the best defense is a good offense. Okay? The Bible is more like the old football adage that the best offense is a good defense. So, they say, offense wins games, but defense wins championships. Stuff like that. Right? So God allows us to defend, to use violence, various violence means, whatever means we have, superior to someone else or not, whatever, it doesn't matter, to protect ourselves and others, and so on and so forth, to defend our faith if necessary, and the like. He does not, however, approve of going out and making offensive actions or taking over places as buffer zones. Okay? The vast majority of wars in the history of mankind have come because of fear. Okay? The Babylonians feared the Hittites, so they attacked them first. The Egyptians feared the Babylonians. Okay? The Assyrians feared the Israelis. So on and so forth. The Nazis said, Hitler always said, I'm afraid of my people starving to death. I need the Sudetenland. Okay? If I can get it by peaceful means, fine. If I need to invade, I'll do that. Which he got some by peaceful and some by invasion. But his excuse for expanding the Greater Reich was to feed his people, provide them factories and jobs and so on and so forth. Stalin's judgment or Stalin's excuse to invade Poland, same thing. Poland, the breadbasket of Europe. Nice broad plains like we have in the middle of the United States and fought over for thousands of years. Okay? Those were wrong and sinful. Those invaders. Countries do it all the time, especially today. Proxy wars or wars to fight over there so we don't have to fight here. What's the biblical problem with that? There's a huge biblical problem with that. Okay, we're going to invade Afghanistan, we're going to invade Iraq, we're going to invade Turkey, we're going to invade Mozambique, we're going to invade whatever. So, because we know our enemies are there, so we're going to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them here. Ooh, that's all very good and everybody applauds. Yay! Bad biblical strategy. Why? Terrible, rotten, stinky, no good biblical strategy. Why? Yes, sir.
Well, I see two problems with that.
Yep.
For one, it violates the defense principle. You're no longer defending your territory.
Exactly.
The other thing is you're usually over there to depose someone. So you're overthrowing someone that God put there.
Right. Deposing legitimate governments or even illegitimate governments. You know, God is not concerned about legitimacy in government. God, I know this is going to bother some people when I say this, God could care less whether or not Joe Biden stole the election. Okay? Let's get that through our thick skulls. Okay? God could care less. As a matter of fact, God allowed it to happen. Because not a bird falls from the sky or a hair out of your head that God is not in control. That's either true or false, folks. There's no third option. You understand that? There's no third option. God was not asleep at the switch on 9/11. God was not on vacation or off fishing on December 7th, 1941. Even though a lot of Christians like to think that. Yes, ma'am.
I tried to kindly put on Facebook about how he was God's choice of leadership, and I'm going to accept it whether I like it or not.
Right.
I had somebody come back to me and say, well, I don't believe in predestination. And now you're saying predestination.
Then they don't believe in the Bible. They don't believe in the Bible, they don't believe in God. That's what I would tell them. I said, your faith is in the wrong thing then. Your faith is in yourself. If you don't believe in predestination, then your faith is in yourself. Otherwise, how are you getting to heaven? That's what I would ask people. How are you getting to heaven? Well, I'm getting to heaven because I'm a believer. Why are you a believer? Because I heard the gospel. Why did you hear the gospel? Because I went to church. Why did you go to church? Why was there a church to go to? Why was the preacher preaching what he was preaching? Right? Okay? It all has to do with predestination. Your name was written in the book of life before the first atom came into existence. Atom, A-T-O-M. Before the first molecule appeared in this universe, your name, who you are, your personality, your characteristics, everything about you was written in the book of life. That's predestination, folks. Now, That's what the Bible teaches, very clearly. I mean, you can say a lot of things about the Bible, you can say there's a lot of mysterious things in the Bible, but I'm telling you, predestination ain't one of them. Predestination is taught so clearly that you can't possibly deny it, unless you want to deny the truth of the Bible itself. Predestination to election, predestination to heaven, is taught in the Bible, cover to cover. Okay? And that includes everything in your life. That includes all the hairs on your head being numbered. That includes who you're going to marry. That includes how many kids you're going to have, what their names are going to be, who they're going to become. That includes where you're going to live. That includes what job you're going to have. That includes everything about you. Now, you can argue with that. You can not like it. You can protest. Be my guest, okay? Go right ahead. But if you deny it, you're denying the clear, unmistakable teachings of God's holy, perfect Word. So make up your mind what you're going to do. Are you going to accept God's Word or not? So somebody says something stupid like that. I just say, well, then you're certainly getting close to being an unbeliever. Because that's like calling God dumb and stupid and a liar. Yes, sir, you first.
Well, talking about what she stated, I have found that the more people find out that you're not into religion, but the more religious you seem to be, the more they try to question your faith, or they try to erode it. And I have found out that these people are illiterate when it comes to the Bible. They don't educate themselves. They don't. What little they know, they have learned 30 years ago.
Right. And also, second or third or fourth hand.
Right. And also, I think that they're afraid to relinquish control that they think they have.
Yep.
Because you have to first relinquish what control you think you have over your life.
Right.
I mean, you can make the decisions. Am I going to take that job offer? Am I going to move here? Am I going to do or say this?
But who put you in that position?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. That is my point. But they don't want to relinquish that control.
Yeah, human beings in general. It's like Cain and Abel. Go back to Cain and Abel again. Why did Cain kill Abel? Cain killed Abel because he was jealous. He didn't like the fact that God accepted Abel's sacrifice and didn't accept Cain's sacrifice. He was unhappy with the choices that God put before them. He was unhappy with God's control. God basically said to Cain, go out and get another sacrifice. The sacrifice you're bringing me stinks. Go get another one. I don't accept it. But instead of taking responsibility for it, instead of saying, okay, that's my bailiwick. Okay, I'll go out and get some better cantaloupe or whatever it was. All right. Instead of doing that, he kills his brother. Talk about stupid. Talk about ridiculous. Right? But that's exactly what human beings do all the time. Right? I don't like what you just did, God. I don't like it. Well, God's response is, I'm sorry. Probably not even that. He just as well. I feel for you. I feel your pain, and Jesus, because I feel your pain. Been there, done that, right? I didn't want to do it either in the garden. Remember? Hey, let this cup pass from me. I don't want to do this, right? But hey, you got to do what you got to do, right? All right. Okay, let's go. Let's get it done. Okay, come on, folks. I mean, human beings since the fall are very stubborn and very selfish. We think we know it all. We think we're smart. We think, this is the way we're doing it, blah, blah, blah. And, I don't need to ask God. I don't need to involve Him. You know what? Whether you involve Him or not, He's already involved. He's already involved. And now let me make it clear. As like Kurt prefaced his comment, I'll say the same thing. That doesn't mean that God approves of evil. Okay? The fact that God allows evil for a grander, greater, more noble, better purpose does not mean He approves it. Right? Understand that. That's a fact too. So, when I said God doesn't care, I'm talking about the grand scheme of things. God doesn't care. Does God care if somebody in Georgia had a suitcase full of already filled out ballots and lied and cheated against his oath as an election official in order to get a win for Biden? Yeah, he cares about that as far as right and wrong goes. Yeah, sure, he cares about that. I'll give you that. Okay? But as far as the grand scheme of things, as far as the whole plot of the universe and getting the most possible number of souls into heaven, no. And then it's not a concern really as to who cheats and who doesn't cheat, all right, or whatever. That's not a big concern. It's if this is going to end in the salvation of somebody. Let's just take an outrageous example. Probably outrage all kinds of people, but let's take the San Diego woman, okay, 14-year veteran of the Air Force, okay, in intelligence, probably was here in Fort Huachuca at some time in her career. She gets all hopped up and head up, and she buys a ticket, gets on a plane, San Diego, flies to Washington D.C., gets in the crowd, Washington D.C., gets all hyped up in Washington D.C., goes to the Capitol, gets in the building, busts in the door of the speaker's lobby, busts in the window, and starts climbing through the window. Secret Service agent with his pistol ready to go, and he sees this woman coming at him, and she's probably growling or who knows what, making faces or whatever, and maybe somebody that hits his elbow, and gun goes off, hits her in the neck, she bleeds out, dies. Okay. Maybe, just maybe, all right, she had to die at that moment, at that place, at that time. Otherwise, again, for sake of argument, let's say she's a believer. Let's say she's a believer in Jesus, okay? She's got to die at that moment. Otherwise, if she lives, she becomes an unbeliever and goes to hell. Now, do you know that that's not the case? No, you don't. That could very well be the truth, could it? It could be that she has to die at exactly, 10:02 a.m. Wednesday morning in the speaker's halfway in and halfway out of the speaker's door. Otherwise, she goes to hell. You don't know that, see, folks. You ain't God. Our assumption needs to always be that if that person lives one heartbeat longer, they could wind up in hell. And that goes for your son and your daughter and your mother and your father and your wife and your husband and your brothers and your sisters and your friends and your neighbors and everybody else on the face of this planet. We must have the attitude that God knows what He's doing. Because otherwise, we're unbelievers. We must have the attitude that God knows how to get people to heaven and how to keep people out of hell, whose names are written in the book of life. We've got to give God that credit. Otherwise, what are we but hypocrites? I'm not saying it's easy when your teenage daughter gets run off the road and killed by a drunk driver. I'm not saying that. No, it's not easy, and it's not fun, and it's unpleasant. But it's because of sin, and it's because God knows that if your daughter lives an extra day or hour or maybe minute, that she winds up losing her faith and going to hell. That has got to be our assumption about everybody. It's got to be. Or, very much like it, either that person has to die so that somebody else doesn't go to hell. That's also certainly possible. It's got to be, folks. Don't you see that? I hope you do. I hope you understand that. That's everything in the whole world. Whether it's a butterfly flapping its wings over Malaysia, or whether it's a bomb going off in Tehran, or whether it's a guy sneezing at the bottom of Antarctica. You've got to see everything as going to that goal, to get the most possible number of people in heaven that can possibly be in heaven. Period, underline, exclamation point, end of discussion. It's got to be our overriding idea about everything. Certainly life and death, but everything else too. It's got to be. It's just simply got to be. That has to be the way you face life. You've got to face life that way. You just got to.
Well, you can't go out the door.
Or you blow your brains out. Really. I mean, really. Because what other purpose is there in life except going to heaven? What other purpose is there in life but going to heaven? That's it, right? I mean, living for eternity with God, that's it. There's nothing else. You either get that or you go to hell. There's no third option. There's no purgatory. There's no limbo. There's no middle ground. There's no island of misfit sinners or misfit toys or misfit humans. Okay? It doesn't exist, folks. You go to heaven or you go to hell. One or the other. That's it. Period. There is nothing else. And so our thinking has to be wrapped around that idea. Going to heaven. Getting there. And getting anybody and everybody else there. Otherwise, what's the point of life? What's the point of existence? It doesn't have a point. It certainly isn't to accomplish, to accumulate garbage, whatever. It certainly isn't to accumulate stuff, that's for sure. And it certainly isn't to get accolades. It can't be. Because what happens to the accolades? Go to the cemetery is full of people that have won medals. Does anybody know who they are anymore? No. My old man was real insistent. He was really mad at the defense department when he ordered his headstone. When he filled out his thing for his headstone in the military cemetery, Department of Cemetery in Yuma. They told him what he could put on there. He could put on there his rank, tech sergeant, 3 up and 2 rockers. He could put on that. He could put his name, middle initial only. Not middle name, just middle initial. Put that on there. Put the branch of the service, Army. At least he wasn't in the Navy. Those poor Navy, those poor Navy guys, they gotta put on Naval Reserve, Navy or Naval Reserve. And during the war, Dad said, you could always tell the Naval Reserve guys, because the regular Navy guys hated them. They were called, the regular Navy guys were the deep water Navy guys, and the reserve were the yacht club Navy guys. And they hated each other, just hated each other. Anyway, but he couldn't he could put on there his highest medal, which was Bronze Star, would be for valor, okay? But he got 3 Bronze Stars. And he also got 3 Purple Hearts, and he was just as proud of his Purple Hearts as he was of his Bronze Stars. And he said, I put them all on there? No. He was very upset by that. But when I'm dead and gone, 100, 200 years from now, and somebody goes to that cemetery and they see Clarence V. Spencer, Tech Sergeant, Pacific Theater, Army, Bronze Star V, what's it going to mean to them? Absolutely nothing, unless they followed Ancestry.com and there's some relative or whatever. But for the most part, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to care. Right? And I appreciate patriotism as much as the next guy. And I love my country. I do. But guys, 1,000 years from now, when the kid raised their hand in class and say, what was the United States of America? Right? And then all these people who parade up and down the street and who say, well, I died for that piece of fabric there with the red, white, and blue colors on it. When the only place you find that is in an encyclopedia under extinct countries. What is that going to mean? Come on, folks. What is that going to mean? It's not going to mean anything to anybody. Nobody is going to care. Not your ancestors, not your descendants 5 generations down the road. They're not going to care. Nobody's going to care. The only ones who are going to care is you, whether you're in heaven or hell. Okay, I saw a couple names. I think Harry was first.
I have been with many pastors, and
Uh-huh.
I've never had a pastor that would say that the Bible teaches predestination.
I know, because they're scared of it. Yeah. They're scared of it. Because they don't know how to explain it. And because there's no predestination to hell, which doesn't make any sense. If God predestined, if there's person A and person B, and God predestines person A to heaven, what has He done for person B? You would think. He's predestined them to hell, right? Right? Of course, right. Well, yeah, right. But that's not what the Bible teaches. As a matter of fact, the Bible teaches the exact opposite. God wants A and B to both be saved. Okay? Now, the fact that B is not saved is not God's fault. It's His fault. But the fact that A is saved is not His credit, it's God's credit. And that's totally illogical. And that's why they don't teach it. Because they're afraid of it. Because it's illogical. And they're afraid of calling the Bible illogical. Well, of course the Bible is illogical. It's like, that's why I sent you that stuff from Jack. All right? Mathematics is illogical. Okay? 1 and 1 is 2, correct? Exactly. In other words, there is a point. If you take it to its extreme, then you cannot prove that 1 and 1 is 2. That has been found out. Okay? Hey, let me give you another hint. This is a great example. Okay? We got 5 minutes. This sentence is false.
Now you got the Spock conundrum.
Empty, because it is a sentence.
This is what's called an inner inconsistency or an inner contradiction. And it can't exist. It can't exist. And yet, I just wrote it. It's right there in front of you. How about this one? The math geniuses among us will like this one. The infinite number of prime numbers is less than the infinite of all numbers. That is correct. But it's also false, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if something's infinite, nothing could be more infinite or less infinite. You see what we're talking about here, folks? You hear this, because in this pandemic thing, you hear a lot of people talking about science, well, we follow the science. Well, I just gave you 2 examples of science that are completely contradictory and inconsistent. So don't be ashamed, don't be bashful, don't be shy when you find out that the Bible has inconsistencies. Yes, it does. Compared to man's finite limits of understanding, the Bible is inconsistent and contradictory. But then again, so is science. Big flippin' deal. Okay? They don't cut one over on us. They're just as inconsistent and just as contradictory as we are. We're all in the same boat. And when it comes all down to it, when it's all boiled and said and done, the only difference is who's in heaven and who's in hell. Period. That's it. That's the only difference there is. There's no other difference. So, I understand people's getting excited and getting upset about, politics, or getting upset or excited about sports, or getting upset or excited about, religion even, or whatever, this and that. But folks, come on, in the big picture here, in the big picture, it's all about going to heaven and hell, and going to heaven is all about believing in Jesus as Lord and Savior. And that's all about this here book. This is how we get that information right here. This is, so, and as Jack has pointed out lately, Pastor Cashone, this is therefore, this is the only perfect thing on the face of the earth, or even in the entire universe. God's Word is the only perfect thing that man has access to. Nothing else. This is the only perfect thing there is. Okay. A couple more hands. I saw Tony.
We can kind of look at all this, and everyone seems so troubled in what you're talking about. They're worried about the green deal. They're worried about all sorts of things that the other party is going to be injecting, supposedly, whatever.
Maybe.
So it kind of makes me wonder who is going to be our Moses. They really had some real problems back then, real persecution, real deaths was really taking place. Then we step up in history just a little further. You want to see another example of this? What about those poor Jews that were in line and millions were being gassed?
Yeah.
Right? That was a real problem.
Look at that. Look at those two examples that you just gave. The Israelites were in Egypt for 450 years before Moses showed up.
Yeah. Took a while, huh?
And 250 of those years, at least, if not more, were in slavery.
Yeah.
How long could we be in slavery to the other party, as you so nicely call it? How long could we be in slavery to the other party? 250 years?
Well, we're trying to extend it, of course, that's part of our concern.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, we could be. Or look at the other example, the Jews. Okay. God stepped in eventually in 1945, and the big red one goes rolling into Treblinka or wherever, and shuts the ovens off, but they started running in 1942.
And of that line of Jews, those millions going to be gassed, right? How many went to heaven?
I have no idea.
I would say zero.
Well, I don't know. Maybe some, maybe a few.
Because of their belief, right?
Maybe one of them met a German who was a real good guy. Not every guard was a schnook. Some of them were probably good guys. Some of them were probably good Lutherans. Right? Okay, like Wally's family. Huh? Maybe this Jew, let's say, ran into a German guard and they got the yakking, and the German guard gave him a little bit of gospel and converted the guy, and it was only because he went to the camp that he became a believer in Jesus and went to heaven. Now, how many souls up on those camps going to heaven would it take to make the Holocaust worthwhile? To God, one. Yeah. Think on that for a minute. Or let's say he doesn't even die then. Let's say he doesn't even die then. Let's say he's a kid and he's spared, and family immigrates to wherever, let's say Argentina, just for fun, or Brazil or wherever, and he goes there, and of course, a very, very Roman country, and the guy gets converted to Romanism. And okay, it's not the perfect religion in the world, it's got some problems, but hey, it's got the gospel, it's got the Trinity, that's what that guy did. Why is up in heaven? Would never have been there, would have spent his entire life in Amsterdam and gone to hell. So again, you've got to think in these terms. You've got to think in these terms. Okay? Because if we don't, again, we're insulting God. We really are. And we're being real hypocrites. Right? If somebody comes to me, if a teenage girl comes to me and says, "Oh, you know, I'm pregnant, me and my boyfriend are fooling around. I'm 17 years old. He's not going to marry me. He has no interest in marrying me, whatever. Oh, this is terrible. I need to get an abortion." You know, what am I going to say? I'm going to say, "Ah, boy, you're sure right about that." Yeah. No. Why? Is it what? Just because it's murder? No, that's not even the biggest reason. The biggest reason is there's a soul that could go to heaven. We want that soul to go to heaven. That's a brand new soul. That soul to go to heaven. Okay? And we want the mother to go to heaven too, for that matter. Right? That's why I do all the things I do. That's, people ask me, why are you so passionate about this? Why are you so excited about this and that or whatever? Why does it matter? Because we're talking eternal destination. Your eternal destination depends on sometimes what comes out of my mouth. Right? Not depends in the ultimate sense, but depends in a tool in the hands of the Holy Spirit sense. Right? And if I lead you wrong, somebody else has got to lead you right. I mean, hopefully that happens. Yes, sir.
Comment from online, Rebecca just stated that I just wish I know what God, was doing.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
And again, I think, certainly we know in the big picture, certainly, getting us, first of all, I hate to sound selfish like that, but it's a fact, okay, getting us to heaven, certainly, and then again, getting the most possible number of people to heaven that can possibly get to heaven, okay? That's what he's doing. But that's pretty broad. And, how to connect the dots, how to connect things like 9/11 or December 7th or whatever, or, Benghazi or January 6th at the Capitol, how to connect those things to that goal. That is hard, yes. It's very, because we're not gone. It's as simple as that. We're not gone.
The biggest threat is really the virus right now, really. I mean, yeah, we got people out there indicating that they're going to take over the world whether they want.
I don't know about that.
Throughout the whole world, we got people dying all over the place.
I would say the virus is certainly got to be sending a whole bunch of people to heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably sending a bunch of people to hell too, but it is certainly, again, what is the first thing we need to think about? We need to always think about whatever God is doing, He's sending people to heaven.
But this is like a world war. People are dying all over throughout the world.
Right.
And the whole world is fighting against this thing.
But as I pointed out when this whole thing started, it is a very minor world war compared to past world war. Right?
No, not really.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yes, it is.
Oh yeah.
No other war. We got millions of people dead right now because of this virus. We never had millions in a war.
Oh yeah. The Black Plague.
Other than the Jewish,
The Black Plague killed
Oh yeah.
millions. I mean, we're talking tens of millions.
Yeah.
Right? And other plagues too.
Yeah.
Okay. The one plague in Rome I talked about, 2,000 people a day in one city. In one city, 2,000 a day. The highest in Los Angeles, which is the highest it's been anywhere in the country, has been 500. So compare that. Compare 500 a day to 2,000 a day. So, and look at the tsunami back in, whatever, 2011? 250,000 people in one day. Boom, just like that. Gone. Right? Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 500,000 people, 1.5 million people gone like that. Instant. Some of them vaporized. Right? So, no, I completely reject the idea that things happening now, anything happening now, as a historian, I can tell you this. Okay? If somebody said in 1451, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to the earth, okay, I would tell him, even though that's true, okay, but it's only true because we can look back 500 years, right? But if I was living in 1451, in the middle of the Black Plague, and somebody said to me, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in Europe, I would still tell him, no, you don't know that. You have no idea what God may have in mind down the road. You have no concept, right? You know, it's like some people online were talking about, and we really got to get that done. Some people were talking online about, Civil War. They don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea what they're talking about. All right? It's one thing to be fed up with taxes and grab your musket down from the fireplace. All right? That's fine. Enjoying your Minutemen on Lexington Green and go at it. All right? Because the British over there, you got cannons, they got cannons. You got muskets, they got muskets. And, even though they outnumber you and they're professionals, it's still somewhat of a fair fight. Right? Same thing, okay? You're going to take away my plantation, you're going to take away my free labor, I'm going to fight you on that. You're going to put big tax levies on our cotton and our tobacco, we're going to tax you, and we're going to fight you on that. Okay? Again, it's real easy. Call up the state militias, which were independent of the National Army at that time. Let's call up the state militias. Let's have the Georgia State Militia go attack the Indiana State Militia. Okay, fine, they do that. They got cannons, we got cannons. They got muskets, we got muskets. Okay? All right, we can do that. That's not a problem. So what do we do today? There's only two choices you have today. You either go about your business, or you do what they did on Wednesday, only you take it up a couple notches. So fine, you get 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000, let's say 500,000. Let's say 500,000 guys and gals, throw the gals in there for fun. 500,000 people go home, they get their AKs, they get their ARs, they get 1,000 rounds or 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 rounds of ammo to carry, that's pretty heavy. But okay, and they all get lined up outside of Kansas City, and they're going to take on, they're going to take on the Kansas Armory or whatever, take it over so they can get some good stuff. All right? Who's going to meet them? Well, by that time, Fort Riley is going to show up, and Fort Knox is going to show up, and the whomever else. And guess what they're going to show up with? They're going to show up with Apache helicopters, and they're going to show up with nuclear bazookas or whatever they exist, and they're going to show up with F-14s, and they're going to show up with this and that and whatever. You know how long that battle's going to last? That battle's going to last about 10 minutes. Now, if somebody wants to do that, if somebody wants to try that, and get the state militias to all get together and say, okay, we're going to obsess the government, okay, good luck with that. There was all these rumors about cadre of officers back in the Obama days who were going to take over if Obama went too wacko, right? What were they called? Oath takers, the oath givers, the oathers, oath keepers. Oath keepers. The oath keepers. These were active military people in the military, ensconced in there. They only knew who each other were. Nobody else knew who they were. Generals and colonels and all kinds of stuff. And they were going to lead their guys in a mutiny. Right? If Obama went a little haywire. Right? That's the only way I see this being even remotely plausible. Because then at least you got the bazookas on both sides.
Isn't that why Obama did that big clean?
I don't know. That's one of the rumors.
Yeah.
But even if you do that, guys, even if let's say you do that, all right? Again, you're talking a battle of Shiloh every other day. All right? You're talking massacres like you can't possibly even imagine. All right? If the state militia in Arizona gets a feather up their rear and they decide, hey, they're going to take on whatever, and the state militia of California says, no, we're going to be faithful to Biden, and they go attack each other. Now, of course, I know some people are going to say, well, this is the guard. They probably would hit the broadside of a barn. I understand this, but eventually they'll get better.
No, California can't attack us. They're locked down with the code.
They're locked down. That's right. All right, let's move on. Well, one more and then let's move on.
Bottom line for me, I always remember the passage that says God's ways are not my ways,
Right. Right.
and we can't understand it because He's God and we're not.
Yep. There you go.
That's bottom line.
Well, we're not going to finish Islam again, but that's okay. Let's get through it a bunch anyway. So let's talk a little bit about the divisions. Go down to the fourth paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, where it says, thus, almost immediately after Muhammad's death, various rivals began to compete for the headship of Islam. The two main groups were the Companions and the Legitimists. These two camps still exist today in the two main divisions of Islam. Sunnis, which word means norm, which that would be the Legitimists, I guess, and who had followed Abu Bakr, father of Muhammad's favorite wife, Aisha. The Sunnis select each new leader as needed. These leaders are known as a caliph, or caliph, meaning successor. The Sunnis make up the vast majority of the Muslim world. On the other hand, Shiites, the other one, the Shiites follow Ali, husband of Fatima, Muhammad's favorite daughter. Their teachers are known as Imam, which means leader, of which there are supposed to be only 12 in all of history. Understand that. Okay? So when an Imam shows up and says, I am the 12th Imam, look out. The last one being Mahdi, which in Islam means the guided one. Arabic means the guided one, who will usher in the last days and the final judgment. We'll look closer at this division later. So understand that. When we look at the Shiites, we may not have time today, but next week, we look at the Shiites, understand that if you are the Mahdi, you are the last Imam, and you are supposed to usher in the end of the world. This is what people don't get about the difference between Saddam Hussein being a Sunni, having weapons of mass destruction or nuclear weapons perhaps, and Iran being Shiite, having nuclear weapons. Huge difference. If Saudi Arabia, which are Sunni, or Oman, or Yemen, or any of those other countries, or Iraq, okay, manages to acquire nuclear weapons, it's not that big a deal, really. Or like Pakistan does right now, it's an Islam country. But it's a Sunni country. Okay? They've had nuclear weapons for a long time. Not a big deal. Why? Because they have caliphs. And the caliphs come and go. And the caliphs are not interested in bringing about the end of the world. Iran is almost entirely Shiite. And all the leaders are Shiite. And it's run by an imam, or Grand Ayatollah is what they call them there. And their purpose, their entire purpose of existence is to usher in the destruction of the world. And so when they say, when they want or get or acquire a nuclear weapon, that is perfect for them, because then they just shoot it off. They don't care who, they don't care where, they don't care pointed at what. It doesn't matter to them. They just shoot it off. And if they can take out Israel at the same time, so much the better. But wrap your mind around this idea. The spiritual leadership of Iran wants the end of the world. The sooner, the better. Now, of course, as Christians, as believers, we know Jesus is not going to allow that. Or the Father is not going to allow it anyway, because the Father is the only one who knows what the last day is, and He reserves that right to Himself. And so, as believers, we would say, well, let them get nuclear weapons. God's not going to, God the Father anyway, is not going to let them bring about the end of the world. Well, okay, but, you can do a lot of damage without bringing up the end of the world. Okay. Now, the point is, when it gets right down to the bottom line, the point is, anybody else gets nuclear weapons, they pretty much won't use them unless a last resort. Whereas Iran gets nuclear weapons, they will use them as soon as they got them. The minute they got them, they got to use them. As soon as they got one strapped on one of those scud jobs or whatever, they're going to use it. Now, most likely will only affect that part of the world, most likely, but might in fact more, but still, it's going to take out a lot of people. It's going to be very deadly. It's going to be very dangerous. It's going to change the whole complexion of the world. So that's why there is a difference between when people say, "Well, why did we let Pakistan get nuclear weapons? It's a Muslim country, but we're going way out of our way to keep nuclear weapons out of the hands of Iran because Shiites. That's why." Kurt.
Is there any indication of which group Muhammad wanted to really be successor? Like
No.
with the Mormons, we know that it's the Missouri Mormons that Joseph Smith are really the successor of Joseph Smith's line of policy.
Well, no. All we know about the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is that it does have the genetic relatives of Joseph Smith in it. We don't know that that's what Joseph Smith chose. Joseph Smith didn't choose anything. He was killed before he could make any kind of. Brigham Young, by his own admission, Brigham Young, in his own writings, Brigham Young said there was no way to tell. Now, he certainly claimed to be best friends and successor in that sense. And by taking over the way he did and by arming his supporters as he did, when they went into Missouri, and before they got thrown out and went to Utah, he kind of showed that he was the head guy. And by getting rid of all of his, either excommunicating him or killing off all of his rivals, he took over. Yeah. But as far as Muhammad and Joseph Smith both left a mess behind. There's no question about it. They weren't clear anymore. Let's put that way. They weren't clear on who should follow. And yeah, the division is somewhat the same. Abu Bakr is a lot like Brigham Young because Abu Bakr is the one who actually wrote down the ravings of Muhammad to make the Quran. Because he was literate, he could read and write. Muhammad could not. And so he wrote down all of this stuff. And he could have written down anything he wanted. We don't know that he wrote down accurately what Muhammad said. Maybe it was a lot worse. Maybe it was a lot crazier. It could be. Right? We don't have any idea. On the other hand, maybe it was a lot less. For all we know, 90% or 80% of the Quran could be all Abu Bakr. But since his descendants, the Sunnis, are in charge of everything, it worked out okay for him. The fact that Muhammad had so many wives, he had 16 wives, and a lot of children, and all that made things a little more difficult. And the same thing with Brigham Young, or Joseph Smith. He had, I think, 4 when he died. I think. Maybe 6. Depends on who you know. But he could have had as many as 6. And there again, which one was his favorite? We don't know. Was it his original wife? She's the one who took off, and became the reorganized Mormons. But by a lot of accounts, she was not his favorite by any stretch of the imagination. So you're right. That's a good comparison. We've got the Ishmaelites, the Seveners, a split group of the Shiites. We've got the Wahhabis, they're the ones who run Saudi Arabia. Under Ibn Saud, conquered Arabia, set up the current government there. We've got the Mahdists, who are waiting for the Mahdi, usually following someone who has declared himself the Mahdi. They rise every once in a while. If you ever heard the term whirling dervishes, they were Mahdi people. That was in Egypt, in the south of Egypt, in the Sudan area. The Sufis are mystics. They tend to be more Sunni, whereas the Mahdi tend to be Shiite. The Wahhabis tend to be Sunni, and the Ismailis tend to be Shiite. So each group has subgroups. Let's talk a little bit about the Quran. the next paragraph, mentioned before, the Holy Book of Islam is the Quran, which means readings or recitations. For most Westerners, it's a very difficult book to understand and follow. Its organization is neither chronological nor topical, but arranged simply according to the length of the surahs, from the longest to the shortest. So if you pick up the Quran, surah number 1 is going to be the longest in the whole book. The longest book, the longest chapter, whichever way you want to look at it, is right at the beginning. It's not the first one written, and it's not the first one in a story of others in the book. So for example, there are chapters in the Quran that talk about the flood, talk about creation, talk about Abraham and Ishmael, and all that kind of stuff. They're all over the place. They're not in order: creation, then flood, then Abraham, Ishmael. No. They're all over the place. And some of the more famous ones are way at the end, the shorter ones. And in general, the shorter ones are older. That is, they were written earlier than the longer ones. That's not always true 100%, but in general, it's true. Okay? Many of the shortest surahs at the end contain some of Muhammad's earliest revelations. That's what I just said. Each surah is given a name or title corresponding either to the main content of that chapter or referring to some very important or unusual revelation contained there. These revelations are said by Muhammad to have been received from the angel Gabriel, but since Muhammad could neither read nor write, he proclaimed them to others, mostly Abu Bakr, who wrote them down on whatever was at hand. Mostly what was on hand is palm fronds. Palm fronds and the wrappings from palm trees, those wrappings, the brown wrapping that you come off after a while. Those are the things a lot of the wood.
Isn't there a legend that for one of them, they slaughtered a cow and wrote it on the hide?
Yes. Yes. And some surahs were named palm branch or cow or whatever. And that's some of the names. The Quran is 114 surahs or chapters which began to be brought together under the guidance of Abu Bakr shortly after Muhammad's death. So Abu Bakr brought them together and started to patch them all together and put them in some kind of order so you learn, give numbers and all that. But he did that without Muhammad. Muhammad had nothing to do with that. Understand, there was no Quran while Muhammad lived. Okay? So when you hear some of these people talk about Muhammad said this in the Quran, no, that cannot be. Muhammad said this and it was later put into the Quran, yeah. But Muhammad didn't quote the Quran. He couldn't. There was no Quran before his death. So while he was alive, he couldn't quote the Quran. Okay? Understand that? 20 years after Muhammad died. The Quran borrows from many different theologies and many different mythologies. There are elements of Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and a number of fanciful and legendary stories of Arab imagination. For example, and you can look these up if you want to, you can look it up online. Of course, it's only in English, but whatever. The she-camel who leapt out of a rock and became a prophet. Surah 18 describes 7 men and their animals who slept in a cave for 309 years and woke up without having aged. Surah 2 tells of pieces of 4 dead cut-up birds getting up and flying away. That is also in one of the apocryphal Gospels of Jesus. In addition, fantastic and fabulous stories of good and evil jinns. You don't usually pronounce the D. Jinns. These are also what we would call genies in the Quran are too numerous to list. There's tons of them. Also, many stories from the apocryphal literature also became part of the Quran. There are stories from the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Testament of Abraham, the Gospel of Barnabas, among others. For example, Surah 3 comes almost word for word from the fanciful book, the Proto-Evangelion of James the Lesser. And the obvious source of Surah 27 is the so-called Second Targum of Esther, which is a continuation of the book of Esther. Surah 2 repeats the story of Moses being resurrected, which is found in the Jewish Talmud. Surah 21, 29, and 37 describe how Abraham was delivered from Nimrod's fire. This comes directly from the Midrash Rabbah, which we'll talk about when we get to Judaism. It should also be noted that Abraham and Nimrod lived many centuries apart from each other. The story of God lifting up Mount Sinai to destroy the Jews in Surah 7 came from the Jewish book Avodah Zarah. Surah 7 and 20 tell the golden calf jumping out of the fire fully formed and actually moving. This is from Pirk Rabbi Eliezer. Again, we'll hear about him in Judaism. The Testament of Abraham was the obvious source of Muhammad's teaching about the scale being used on the Day of Judgment to weigh good and bad deeds. This is recorded in Surah 42 and 101. As to the literary story of the Quran, the Western view can be summed up by a couple of quotes. Thomas Carlyle wrote, "It is a toilsome reading as I ever undertook, a wearisome, confused jumble, crude, incoherent. Nothing but a sense of duty to carry in your creed through the Quran." Edward Gibbon, we all know him, right? Rise and Fall of Roman Empire. Edward Gibbon described the Quran as an incoherent rhapsody of fable and precept and declamation, which sometimes falls in the dust and sometimes is lost in the clouds. The Quran also contradicts itself in numerous places. There are 4 different accounts of the call of Muhammad. In Surah 2, Muhammad tells his followers they must face Jerusalem to pray. Then he told them in verse 144 of the same surah they must face Mecca. Surah 6 says that Abraham is the first person to believe in Allah. Then Surah 7 tells us that Moses was the first true believer. In the beginning, Muhammad told his followers they could only fight to defend themselves, in Surah 22. Later, he commanded them to go to war to spread his cause, Surah 2. And he ordered all-out war to persecute all other religions, Surah 9. But Surah 32 says a day is 1,000 years in God's sight, but Surah 70 says it is but 50. As Kathy said, there's another surah that says about accepting other religions too. I didn't put it in. Obviously, the Quran contradicts the Bible on many points. Surah 41 says that it took God 8 days to create the world. Genesis 1 told us that's only 6. Surah 11 tells us that one of Noah's sons refused to enter the ark and was drowned in the great flood. Whereas the Bible says Shem, Ham, and Japheth were all spared. Surah 7 even describes the flood as taking place in the days of Moses. Surah 37 states that Abraham went to sacrifice Ishmael, when Genesis 22 says that it was Isaac who was to be sacrificed. Surah 2 says Abraham built the Kaaba in Mecca, and Surah 14 says he lived and worshipped in the valley of Mecca, but the Bible tells us that Abraham lived and worshipped only in Canaan after he left Ur and never traveled as far away as Mecca. Surah 28 describes Pharaoh's wife as the one who adopted Moses, whereas Exodus 2 said it was Pharaoh's daughter. Surah 27 through 40 tell us that Haman lived in Egypt during the time of Moses, worked for Pharaoh, and helped build the Tower of Babel. But Haman actually lived in Persia over 1,000 years later. Surah 20 claims the Jews made the golden calf as a suggestion of the Samaritan, whoever they were, and yet the Bible tells us these people did not come into existence until after the destruction of the northern kingdom, some 800 years after the Exodus. Surah 19 says that Jesus was born under a palm tree. And according to Luke 2, he was born in a stable. Surah 3 says Jesus speaks from his cradle, and Surah 100 tells us how he made clay birds come to life, which is 20 like that. John 2 records that Jesus did his first miracle at the wedding of the king. Surah 4, 5, 75, and 9 proclaim that Jesus is not the Son of God, that he did not die for our sins, that he was not crucified, all in clear contradiction of numerous New Testament passages. The Quran includes Mary as part of the Holy Trinity in Surah 5 and 116. Finally, the Quran has many historical and scientific inaccuracies. Surah 18 claims that Alexander the Great, called Zul Qarnayn there, was a Muslim who worshipped Allah and lived to a very old age. But history teaches that Alexander was a Macedonian Greek who worshipped the gods of Olympus and died at 32. In the same surah, verses 85 and 86, it is claimed that Alexander followed the setting of the sun and found that it went down into the waters of a muddy spring. Surah 2 and 7 tell that an entire village of people were turned into apes because they broke the Sabbath. So, as you can see, this is just the tip of the iceberg. there are literally thousands of contradictions in the Quran, both to itself and the Bible, and history, and science, and everything else. You know, the Bible does say the sun stops still in the sky. Yeah, it's true. And to us, that's what it looks like. But the Bible never went to such stupid extremes as to say the sun set in a muddy pool. So you give God a little bit more credit. In addition to the Quran, Muslims revere the Hadith, or traditions. These are other collected sayings of Muhammad and his early followers. They are not part of the Quran per se, but have equal authority for a Muslim. Please understand that. So even if you would learn the Quran very well, wouldn't do you any good. Because the Hadith is many volumes, many much longer by many times, and would take a lifetime to learn. And Muslims revere that as much, if not more in some cases, than the Quran itself. It's kind of like the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is really not used by Mormons all that much. It's really the Book of Doctrines and Covenants, the Book of Abraham, those things, Pearl of Great Price. Those are used much more. That's why the Salamander letter was so important. And proving it a fake was so necessary to the Mormon church. They had to prove it was a fake. And that's why people were murdered, killed, and everything, and that's why it's so valuable and all this kind of stuff, is because everything about it basically tells us that the Book of Mormon is a fake, and all these other books also are fakes. And so the Salamander letter had to be disproven. It had to be. The Mormon church had a big stake. The Hadith is as important, if not more so, than the Quran itself because it explains and often amplifies what the Quran says. In addition, the Hadith contains much that regulates everyday life for the Muslim. The current English translation of the Hadith runs into 9 volumes. These are not thin little books, folks. These are good-sized books. So take the Quran times 9. That's the Hadith. A good example of the same phenomenon in a cult is the relationship of the Book of Mormon and Doctrines and Covenants with the Mormon Church. Very little of the Book of Mormon is actually used in everyday Mormonism, while the details of the way the religious practice can better be seen in the teachings found in the Doctrines and Covenants. The main emphasis of the Hadith is to teach what a Muslim must do to be admitted into paradise. Throughout the Hadith, it is clearly taught that to enter paradise, one must gain Allah's favor. This favor must be earned by following a very precise and elaborate set of rules and rituals. Needless to say, there is no concept of salvation by grace in the Hadith or the Quran itself for that matter. Thus, the great importance of the Hadith is that it aids Muslims in their quest to gain entrance into paradise and escape the terrors of hellfire. The basic teachings of the Hadith can be summed up in the so-called 5 pillars of Islam, which we will do next. So we will begin next time in the top of page 33. You may not be able to see the 33, but that's what it is. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Which Iran has that attitude. Would we be right in taking them out, or the bombs?
No.
We have to wait till after they do their thing and then take them out?
Well, no. Back to the point we were talking about, and Kurt brought that up about whatever, in wars and defense and all that. I didn't get to finish the second point. The second point is very important. Okay? The other reason that you don't do offense and pretend it's defense is because you trust God. You trust God. If this country was truly a God-fearing nation, if we really believed what was on our money, in God we trust, none of our forces, Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, anything, none of our forces would be further away than the coastal waters of our own country. If we really believe that we trusted, that in God we trust, if we really truly believe that, if we're really a Christian nation, the way that a lot of people like to talk about it as a Christian nation, if that was really true, we wouldn't have a single foreign military base of any kind, nor would there be a single solitary soldier, sailor, or marine anywhere on any ground or in any waters, territorial waters of any country. That's a fact check right there. The only reason that we have bases all around the world, just like the British Empire did, truly, the sun really never sets on the American flag. And that's true, that's true. The only reason for that is because we do not trust God to protect us. We trust in ourselves to protect us. Even though the Bible says over and over and over, trust not in chariots, trust not in princes, trust not in swords, trust not in etc. Da, 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 da. But we claim, oh, we're a Christian nation, we're a Christian nation. And then we got these bases all over the place, and we will, at a drop of a hat, you're right, we will, at the drop of a hat, invade a country someplace in order to, oh, we will fight over there, so we don't want to fight here. Well, who died made us God? Huh? I mean, really, stop and think about that for a minute. You know? How selfish is that, right? I mean, the Bosnians have to fight on their soil. The Israelis have to fight on their soil. The Spanish had to fight on their soil. The Germans had to fight on their soil. The English had to fight on their soil. The French had to fight on... What? Somehow we're special? We're better than everybody else in the world? And we don't have to fight on our soil? Since when? Who died and made us God? I mean, come on. I mean, I don't understand why the whole rest of the nations of the entire world don't rise up and say to us, who the heck do you think you are? Get the heck off of our property.
Well, there's some factions that are doing that.
Well, I know.
Think of how much money we're gonna save
Oh,
if we bring everybody home.
astronomical.
Yeah, and nowadays, you don't need to be bases all over the place. You can get over there in 12 hours. And quicker, yeah. Or quicker, yeah.
You know, I was watching a documentary last night about the railgun, right? If they ever get the stupid thing perfected. Jeez Louise, it goes what is it, 2 miles per second or something like that?
Well, we have missiles now.
Well, but you know, missiles you can do all kinds of things with missiles, right? I mean, you can shoot them down, you can mess with their internal. This is a lump of metal. The railgun there's no explosive in a railgun. You know that?
Right.
It's just kinetic energy, right? And so you just got a lump of metal. You put the lump of metal in there, fire the thing. That's it. It goes in a straight line. Maybe follows the curvature of the earth, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, it goes in a straight line, and it goes 2 miles per second. You can't shoot it down. It's got no internal guidance. You can't mess with its gyroscope or whatever, because it's got one. And it can shoot for I don't know how many miles. I mean, the hundreds, I guess. And so we don't need nothing else. If we ever get the dumb thing fixed, working right. But yeah. So, the fact that and I'm for having 10 aircraft carriers on each coast. But that's just it, on each coast. If we need them, we'll use them. I'm not against a strong military, and I'm not against the military being, a million guys or whatever we need. That's not the point. The point is they don't need to be all over the place.
Yeah, but think if we brought those troops home, what they could do here to help.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and just the cost of sending them, and then the logistics of keeping them in places. I mean, I talked to a guy who was based on the Korean DMZ, and he was telling me about some fantastic figures that what it costs us to keep battalions or companies or whatever on the DMZ in Korea, and it's the gross national product of some countries. And that's just one place. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Okay.
One very small.
Yeah, quick.
But then plus bringing things home and getting them out of the other countries,
Yeah.
and of course those countries that stand up for
Right,
themselves
exactly.
will always turn into us.
Exactly. Yeah. That's close.
May the grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with us all. Amen.